Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be back.
Today we're going to be looking at Remarkably Bright Creatures.
By Shelby Van Pelt.
Yeah, so we're going to be diving into this book about grief and connection and this kind of unique bond between a woman and an octopus.
Very unique.
Yeah, all set in this charming little seaside town.
Sounds charming.
We've got a really great book review that we're going to be pulling from to kind of guide our conversation today.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I think this is a fascinating premise.
Oh, for sure. The way Van Pelt brings in these scientific insights about octopus intelligence and combines those with this heartwarming story, that's what really drew me in.
I know, and how she, introduces us to Marcellus right away.
Yes.
Like, he's not just swimming around.
Right.
He is, solving puzzles. He's escaping his tank.
Using coconut shells.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It just, immediately you're kind of, thrown into this world.
Yeah.
We were like, wait a minute.
What do I know about animal intelligence?
Yeah, everything I thought I knew is
Right.
wrong.
Totally. And one detail from the review that really stuck with me was how Marcellus seemingly predicts the death of a fellow aquarium resident,
Oh, wow.
which is very subtle, but
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, the way Van Pelt describes it, you can't help but wonder
Yeah.
if there's a deeper level of awareness going on.
Yeah, it really does make you think about those mysteries of the ocean
For sure.
and all the creatures down there. But then, of course, we have the human element, too.
Yes.
Which is Tova, this widow who forms this unlikely friendship with Marcellus.
Right.
So what did you think about her?
I thought she was such an interesting character, and I think the review really praised Van Pelt for depicting her grief with sensitivity and nuance.
Okay.
You know, it's not just sadness, it's a lot of complex emotions. There's loneliness, there's regret, even just a sense of purpose lost after the death of her husband.
Yeah.
And so her nightly visits to Marcellus's tank become her sanctuary in a way.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like this place where she could just process her feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I just thought that was a really beautiful part of the book, was those kind of quiet moments
Yes.
between Tova and Marcellus where it does seem like
Yes.
they're almost communicating.
Absolutely.
But we also have other characters that come into play here.
We do.
So we have Jacob,
Yes.
who's this young man seeking redemption, and Shyla, who's this troubled teenager who are both drawn to the aquarium.
Right. And I think they're really crucial to the story's overall message.
Okay.
The review points out how skillfully Van Pelt kind of connects these seemingly different, disparate characters,
Right.
highlighting this theme of finding connection in unexpected places.
Yeah.
And the aquarium itself becomes like a microcosm of this.
Okay.
It's a place where people from different backgrounds facing these different challenges
Yeah.
can find solace and a sense of community.
And that kind of brings us to the setting itself, right? The coastal town, the ebb and flow of the tides. This ever-present mystery of the ocean.
Right.
It's almost like its own character in itself.
It is. I completely agree. And the review touches upon this, praising the way Van Pelt weaves those ocean images right into the narrative.
It's not just like a backdrop.
No, it's not just a backdrop.
Yeah.
It really is a symbol
Oh, I
of
see.
the vast unknown, the depths of human emotion, and the potential for transformation.
I love that. Yeah, it's so immersive.
It is, you can almost feel that salty air and hear those seagulls as you're reading.
I know. All right, so let's dive in a little bit to Jacob's character.
Okay.
So the review mentioned he has a troubled past.
He does.
He's kind of searching for forgiveness. What stood out to you about his storyline?
You know what intrigued me was just the sense of mystery surrounding him.
Okay.
He's drawn to the aquarium, he's volunteering his time, but he's so clearly haunted by something from his past.
Yeah.
And the review highlights how his storyline adds this layer of suspense
Oh, interesting.
to the novel, keeping the reader guessing about his true motivations.
Yeah, for sure. And then we have Shyla,
Yes.
who brings just this raw energy into the story. And the review mentioned she's facing some really tough circumstances.
Yeah, she's dealing with poverty, a difficult family situation,
Right.
and a lack of opportunities.
Yeah.
And the aquarium becomes kind of an escape for her,
Yeah.
but also a place where she confronts some harsh realities.
It's interesting how Van Pelt uses these three very different characters to explore those themes
Yes.
of isolation and connection and second chances.
Absolutely.
Each of them is seeking something,
They are.
whether it's solace or forgiveness or just belonging.
Right. And the aquarium, with its diverse inhabitants and its focus on care and understanding, becomes kind of a symbolic representation of that search.
Of that search, yeah.
It's a place where brokenness and healing can coexist, where these unlikely friendships can blossom.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It is. It's really fascinating how each of their journeys kind of intertwines with the others, and that aquarium becomes this central point of connection for everyone.
Yeah, and I loved how the review pointed out that there was a really subtle environmental theme throughout.
Oh, yeah, it is very subtle.
It wasn't like a preachy save the planet kind of message,
Right.
but it was more of just like a quiet appreciation for the delicate balance of marine life and, the impact we have on it.
Exactly. It's more about fostering a sense of wonder and respect
Right.
for these creatures, and like the way that Tova interacts with Marcellus, recognizing his intelligence and his individuality.
Hmm.
It really reminds us that even creatures that are seemingly so different from us,
Yeah.
they deserve our empathy and our protection.
And speaking of empathy, I was really struck by the way that Van Pelt portrayed the power of storytelling in the book.
Oh, interesting.
It wasn't just entertainment. It was a way for the characters to really understand themselves
Right.
and connect with each other.
That's such a great observation. And like when Tova would share stories about her late husband with Marcellus,
Yeah.
almost like confiding in him,
Yeah.
it's just such a beautiful example of how storytelling can be a form of healing.
Right?
And even Marcellus, through his, clever manipulations of his tank environment,
Yeah.
seems to be telling his own story in a
Oh,
way.
that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it like that, but
Yeah,
yeah, he is.
he is.
And then you have Jacob,
Right.
who's, piecing together his past through these fragmented memories.
Mm-hmm.
And he ultimately finds the courage to share his story with other people.
And the review actually mentions how Jacob's act of storytelling becomes a catalyst
Wow.
for his own redemption.
Okay.
So by confronting his past and sharing his truth, he's able to find a sense of peace and belonging.
Yeah, it really shows how stories can bridge divides and create understanding.
For sure.
So let's circle back to Tova's relationship with Marcellus for a moment.
Okay.
Because I will admit, when I first started reading this book, I was a little skeptical about,
Yeah.
a woman forming such a deep connection with an octopus.
I understand the skepticism. It is definitely an unusual premise.
Mm.
But what I think Van Pelt does so well is she grounds the relationship in this emotional realism.
Okay.
It's not just about quirky antics.
Right.
It's about these two beings, each dealing with their own forms of loss and isolation,
Yeah.
finding solace in each other's presence.
Yeah, you're totally right. It's that shared sense of loneliness and the need for connection that makes their bond so compelling.
Exactly.
And I thought it was interesting how the review contrasted Tova's relationship with Marcellus with her interactions with the other human characters.
Yes, the review points out that Tova's relationships with other humans, like Cameron, the aquarium manager,
Right.
are often fraught with misunderstanding and tension.
Yeah.
It's almost as if she's able to communicate more freely with Marcellus, who doesn't judge her or make demands of her.
That is such a good point. It kind of makes you think about the limitations
Yeah.
of human communication.
It does.
Sometimes, and maybe we do need to be more open to different forms of connection, even those that seem unconventional.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the underlying messages of the book.
Okay.
Is to challenge our preconceived notions about intelligence and communication.
Yeah, and it reminds us that connections can come from the most unexpected places.
Yes.
We often seek out connection with those who are similar to us,
Right.
but sometimes those most profound connections are with those who are vastly different.
Precisely. And it's those differences that can really enrich our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
100%. Okay, so speaking of the world around us,
Yes.
let's talk about the setting a little bit more, the coastal town.
Okay.
It just feels so vividly drawn,
It does.
almost like another character in the story.
Yes, definitely the review highlighted Van Pelt's really skillful use of those sensory details
Hmm.
to create this really rich and immersive setting.
Totally. Like I could feel the cool ocean breeze and smell the salty air
Yes.
as I was reading.
Exactly. And the way she describes the changing tides and the rhythm of the ocean,
Yeah.
it all contributes to that atmosphere of the story.
Right. It's almost as if the setting itself is mirroring the character's emotional ebbs and flows.
I think you're right. There's a sense of both tranquility and wildness in
Yeah.
the setting, which reflects their own internal struggles.
Yeah, it's like another character shaping the narrative. And it makes me wonder if Tova's connection with Marcellus is heightened because she lives in such close proximity to the sea.
That's a fascinating thought. Perhaps there's a sense in which Tova is drawn to that mystery and vastness of the ocean
Mm-hmm.
because it reflects something within her own soul.
Yeah, it's like she's seeking answers in the depths of the ocean, just as she's seeking understanding in her relationship with Marcellus.
Right.
But the ocean's not the only setting that plays a role here. We also have the aquarium,
Yes, the aquarium itself is almost like a character, too.
Right.
And the review points out how the aquarium becomes this microcosm of the larger world,
Okay.
reflecting these themes of diversity and interdependence and this delicate balance of life.
It's so fascinating how she uses the aquarium to explore these themes.
It is.
You see the care and the attention that goes into maintaining those tanks and ensuring the well-being of the creatures.
Right.
But then there's also this sense of confinement,
Yeah.
of these animals being removed from their natural habitat.
It does raise some questions about our relationship with nature.
It does.
To what extent are we justified in keeping wild animals in captivity, even for educational purposes or conservation purposes?
That's a really thought-provoking question.
It is.
And I think the book suddenly grapples with that.
It does, especially through Jacob's character.
Yeah.
His backstory involves a traumatic encounter with a wild animal.
Right.
And it adds another layer to this discussion. It highlights the potential for both wonder and danger in our interactions with the natural world.
Yeah, and that our actions have consequences.
Absolutely.
For both ourselves and for the environment.
Right.
Speaking of consequences, one thing that stuck out to me in the review was how they praised Van Pelt's handling of all the different plot twists and the revelations.
Oh, yeah. I was completely hooked by those twists and turns.
Me too.
They were unexpected, but they felt organic to the story.
Yeah. What did you think?
I agree. The review specifically mentioned how Van Pelt expertly paces the story, balancing those moments of quiet reflection with these moments of heightened tension and suspense.
Right.
And those revelations, when they come, are both surprising and emotionally satisfying.
They felt earned.
Yes.
Like they arose naturally from the characters and their relationships.
Exact. And I think that's what makes the story so compelling. We're not just following a series of plot points.
Right.
We're actually invested in the characters and their journeys.
Yeah, and those journeys are about so much more than solving a mystery or finding romance. They're about grief and healing and forgiveness and the search for connection in a world that can often feel very isolating.
And I think that's what makes Remarkably Bright Creatures so special. It reminds us of the power of empathy, importance of looking beyond appearances, and this possibility of finding beauty and connection in these most unexpected places.
This book is so heartwarming, but at the same time, it just makes you think.
Yeah.
And I haven't even mentioned the ending yet, but I was really struck by that sense of hope and renewal that Van Pelt kind of leaves us with at the end.
Yeah, I think the ending is really impactful. And, I'm not going to spoil it for our listener.
Right.
But I think what she does so well is tie together all these different threads of the story.
Yeah.
In a way that just feels so satisfying and emotionally resonant.
Right.
It's not this neat, tidy resolution. It's more like just recognizing that life is messy and unpredictable. And even with loss and uncertainty, there's always potential for growth and new beginnings.
I love that idea that even when things kind of fall apart, there's still that beauty and possibility to be found. And I think that message is really embodied in Tova's character.
Oh, agree.
She starts out so lost and heartbroken, but through her connection with Marcellus and the other characters, she finds this renewed sense of purpose and joy.
And the review specifically praises Van Pelt for creating such a relatable and inspiring protagonist.
Yeah.
She's a woman in her 70s who's gone through a lot of hardship.
Right.
She never gives up on life.
Right.
She's open to new experiences. She's willing to challenge her own assumptions. And ultimately, she figures out a way to move forward with grace and resilience.
It's just this reminder that it's never too late to learn and grow.
Yes.
And to find those connections and that meaning, even in those unexpected places.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, did you have a favorite moment or scene from the book?
Oh, that's tough. There were so many that stood out to me.
I know, right?
But if I had to pick just one, it would be that scene where Marcellus orchestrates his escape from the tank using this series of carefully planned maneuvers.
So clever.
It's just brilliant, and it shows her ability to blend that scientific accuracy with imaginative storytelling.
Oh, I love that scene too. And it's not just clever. It speaks to that theme of challenging how we perceive animal intelligence.
Yes.
He's not just a mindless creature,
Right.
He's a thinking feeling being
Exactly.
with this strong will to survive.
And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this book is to really recognize the intelligence and the sentience of other species
Yeah.
and to treat them with respect and compassion.
And to remember that we can learn so much from
Yes,
the natural world if we're open to it.
if we're open to it.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, were there any parts of the book that you didn't connect with as strongly?
The review did mention a few instances where the plot was predictable.
Right.
And I would agree with that. There were a few times where I felt like I knew what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of supporting characters that I thought felt a little underdeveloped.
Okay.
But honestly, those were just minor things for me.
Sure.
The emotional core of the story, those relationships, and that overall message were just so compelling
Right.
that those minor flaws didn't really matter to me.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about perfection. It's about how the story makes you feel
Exactly.
and what it leaves you thinking about.
Right, and I think Remarkably Bright Creatures achieves that.
Yeah.
It stays with you and it makes you look at the world a little differently, and it reminds you of how important connection and empathy are and that beauty of the natural world.
Couldn't agree more. Well, it seems like we've reached the end of our deep dive
It does.
into Remarkably Bright Creatures.
It's been quite a journey.
What a journey it has been. We explored themes of grief and healing, second chances, the power of storytelling, and the intelligence of octopuses.
And we were reminded that those connections can be found in the most unexpected places, and that even when facing loss, there's always hope.
Absolutely.
And that the natural world is just full of wonder and beauty.
So to our listeners, if you are looking for a heartwarming and thought-provoking read, I highly recommend diving into Remarkably Bright Creatures.
I reckon that.
It will stay with you long after you finish it. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.